Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I want to talk about why people might stop reading your novel. Now, once again, reading and writing are subjective activities, so everyone has a little bit of a different opinion, and by no means is my opinion correct. It's just kind of what I feel whenever I read, why I stop reading, and kind of some things that I try to avoid in my own writing. So if you're into this, if you love reading and writing just as much as I do, please press that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The number one reason why I stop reading a book, which is not very often because I usually always plug through books and I just always want to know what happens and I don't want to give up. But something that could stop me from finishing the story is if there is tons of description that is not essential. So description about the setting, description about a character, just being too overly descriptive. I don't need to know every little thing that happens. I want my mind, my imagination to do the work. And so these authors are often found in literary fiction like John Steinbeck. Like, I don't really want to know exactly how they killed the animal, untethered it, put it on the campfire, ate it, the campfire sizzled. I don't want to know that whole big story because it's not that relevant to the whole plot or character development of the book. So having these non-essential descriptions can really slow the pace of your story down. They can overshadow, good character development or good world building. Every genre is different, so sci-fi might need more description than, let's say, a YF novel. But I think in today's market, if you are more of a literary writer, regardless of, your subgenre, I think it's important to ensure that your novel has enough of an upmarket spin on it that carries the pace of your story forward more quickly. Number 2, having too many characters overall or too many characters introduced at once. I ask some of my friends and family, what they don't like to see in a story. So my friend Becca told me that she hates whenever too many characters are introduced right off the bat, and I would agree with her. I think that makes things very confusing, especially if characters have the same name. It also creates this detachment from your protagonist because the reader is going to be focused on too many people that are non-essential to your story. And when you're focused on all of these different things, you don't feel as much, the theme doesn't get wrapped around your mind as much, and you're not going to remember the story as much. So try not to have too many characters, and especially try not to introduce them all at once. 3, going along with having too many characters, you don't want to have too many points of view. I mean, there are some authors that can execute a lot of different viewpoints flawlessly. I think Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina is a great example of that. I think one of the reasons why it works so well is because Tolstoy will go with lots of chapters from Anna Karenina's perspective and lots of chapters between other characters' perspectives, and it will go like, 3 or 4 or 5 chapters in one person's perspective before moving on to another person. So because the story is longer, we can bond better with more characters. I think Catherine Stockett also does a great job of that with The Help for the same reason. She really chunks out her novel between the different perspectives. I'm not a fan of authors that kind of head hop in a chapter, even if it's not true head hopping. I don't ever like to see more than one person's perspective per chapter unless you have this like really hard to pull off scene, or there's, you need to like execute some irony or something like that, and a hard to pull off climax. I think there are some one-off situations where that's acceptable, but for the most part, I don't want to see 2 different perspectives in one chapter, ever. Number 4, being too formal with your writing tone, being kind of too objective and too far back from your characters. And unfortunately, someone that I think does this is Celeste NG. Her stories are all very objective. They are, the ultimate brilliance with word execution, and her sentences are just flawless. They're all very technically correct, and she has a great technical emphasis on her writing. But unfortunately, I think that can come across as being too formalized, and as a result, we can't really get into the heads of the characters. And especially with a writer like that writes a thin plot, it's really important to get into the heads of every single character. So I don't like writing that's very formalized or, too detached. I really want to be able to hear the characters' voices, and I think that having this, kind of hands-off objective narration can also really slow down the pace of your story. Throwing a random political tangent in your story just for the sake of being political. This would be especially detrimental in some genre fiction, such as romance. I think if your story does have a political theme, or your character, it's like an important part of them to be involved in politics, if you want that to be very forthcoming, that's okay to allude to politics. But if your story is simply about like a high school romance, or a divorce, or just some sort of cataclysmic event that's just really that's what your story's about, don't go off on some random political tangent. Don't pull in a political piece. In John Green's last few books, I think he's kind of alluded to some political things, even if they weren't like overtly political. And I'm just kind of like, why? Like, I don't really see why you needed to throw that into your story, other than the fact that you, the author, wanted to get your own politics across in the novel. And I think in today's climate, that's kind of a very controversial thing to do. And I would avoid that, because there are people on the left and the right that are very sensitive. And unless you want to be a political author and you want politics to cross-pollinate with your theme, if you will, I would just leave any political rants like out the window. Writing about a controversial subject but not exploring the other side. I think that when you do this, it can come across as preachy, because rarely are these huge cataclysmic things black and white, like unless you're a preacher, you're really far to this side or really far to this side. For most of us, the humanity of the situation is not black and white. And as writers, we want to get to the humanity of the situation. We don't want to be promoting our own agendas or agendas of a specific group. I think someone that does a great job with this is Jojo Moyes in her book, Me Before You. She really takes this very controversial subject of assisted suicide, and she gets to the humanity of the situation. She gets to the humanity of Will's struggle and his relationship with Lou, and that's really what we remember about this story. We don't remember that it was so controversial because Will ended up, going to Switzerland. We remember their love story and everything surrounding that. And I think how she executed that well is, Will's mom was Catholic, and they kind of talked about that. And, it was just as simple as Lou went online, did a Google search, joined this group, and, they kind of talked about like religious aspects of it or moral aspects of it. And it wasn't like this long drawn out thing. It was like maybe a few pages here and there. But I think that was just enough for the subject matter to not come across as being too one-sided or too completely blind to the other side. So just remember, if you have a controversial subject, you might want to just do a little bit of simple exploring on the other side, even though ultimately, your story is going to have a slant because your characters are going to make choices that kind of slant your book. Boring sentences are nothing to think about from the here to the there. And what I mean by that is, I'm definitely a writer's reader, so I look into the technical elements, I look into figurative language, literary elements, personification, similes, metaphors, all of that kind of stuff. I want that imagery to be something that lasts for me long after I read the novel. I want to be able to pull out quotes to put on my Instagram, my Twitter. Like, I want the novel to make that kind of impact on me. And I think authors like John Green do a great job with giving us like lots of metaphors and similes to think about, and even just having a really variant sentence structure. So that's important to me. I think that can really pick up the pace of your novel, and in some of those more reflective moments, really carry the momentum forward. Not developing a voice. Even in some of the most exciting plot-driven novels, I still want to feel the voice of the story. I think that The Hunger Games is such a wonderfully executed book. I think Katniss is such a great character. I think the plot is so interesting that the voice really did take a backseat in that novel, but I think it would be so much more remarkable if Katniss really had a voice, and if that story maybe engaged more humor or just more humanity in it. For me, Again, I think John Green, he does a great job with voice. I think Emily Giffin does a really great job with voice. But sometimes in sci-fi, voice can take a back seat. But for me, if I feel like the book is too plot driven and I'm not hearing enough of the character's voice and maybe some other things are executed a little bit more poorly, then I could stop reading. So never discount the importance of voice. I think that voice is developed more and more as you spend more time with your characters, as you work on your revisions. Don't be afraid to add humor into your story. Voice is really important. It's just as important as character and plot. Not having a profound theme to think about. Theme goes hand in hand with conflict, your plot, and your pinch points, but it should never be the most glaring thing about your novel, if you will. However, your theme still should be very profound, and ideally you want a timeless theme, even if you are writing genre fiction, even if you are writing about the 1970s and a high school romance. Like, you definitely want your theme to stretch beyond that. You want your theme to be about true love or growing up or, something even narrower than that. So just always try to aim for a big theme that really makes your readers think, because theme can really be that differentiating factor that sells your story. So that wraps up this video. I hope you guys like that. Share with me some of your big reading turnoffs in the comments below. I think it will really help us all if we're kind of aware of each other's tastes and preferences. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!